But we get to find new ways of actually giving gifts, and maybe even in another way, being the gift for the people in our lives. But when I say be the gift, I'm not sure if we're all kind of on the same page about what that means. And so I just want to take a step back and give you an overview of where my mind and my heart are when I say be the gift. And first, I just want to simply define it as, well, what exactly is it? What am I talking about when I say be the gift? First, I'm going to talk about, well, what is the gift? And then what does it mean to be the gift? What is the gift? And what does it mean to be the gift? Now, Sister Bethany later on is going to talk about how we do that. She's going to get into the practicals because she lives that in such a beautiful way. She's a close personal friend of ours. Actually, her and Sarah and I all went to the same church in high school. And so she'll share a little bit about how to do that. But I just want to break open, what even is that in the first place? In John's Gospel, chapter 13, Jesus gathered his apostles together. Now, they had been with him through some incredible things. They've seen him raise people from the dead. They've seen him cast out demons from people. They've seen him make the lame walk. They've seen him make the deaf be able to hear again and the mute be able to speak again. They've seen him get out of a boat and just walk on the water. They have seen Jesus do some incredible things. And then we tune into this verse, and Jesus says, I have a new commandment for you. I have something new for you. And I want you to understand the significance of that word new, because when Jesus said, I have something new for you, we hear new and we often just think like a little bit better than the old, something just slightly updated, right? But the word actually in the Greek and in the Hebrew, the word that Jesus was actually speaking and the word the apostles would have been hearing was more closely translated like revolutionary, right? Groundbreaking, never before seen. It wasn't just a slight upgrade. It was something that once this happened was going to change everything. So Jesus is telling them, I've got something new for you, something that's going to change everything. Now imagine if the guy who you've seen raise people from the dead and multiply fish and loaves of bread and walk on the water, if that guy is saying to you, I've got something new, something revolutionary, something never before seen, something that's going to change anything, you're going, oh my gosh, what could it possibly be? He's going to make us all be able to fly. Like he's going to give us magic powers. He's going to do just something crazy, right? Because this is the guy who they've been following, who they've seen work literal miracles. And so he gets their attention. And he says, I have something new for you. And so they're like, oh, sweet, here it comes. This is the big thing. And once he has their attention, he says, love one another. And you got to think they must have been a little disappointed with that, maybe much like you're looking at me right now. Like, really? That's what you have for us right now? We've been in the same house, stuck together for 8 months, and you're telling us to love one another? Yes, love one another. But he says, as I have loved you, love one another. Now, see, the second part of that is so important because we get stuck a lot of times on love one another. Hey, love one another. And we hear that. And that's like, great. It makes us feel warm inside and it makes us feel like, okay, cool, that's our mission. Let's go do it. But then what happens is people are people and like life happens and you find that it's difficult to love. It's difficult to love. And if you don't have a framework for what does it even mean to love, then you don't even know where to start. And when it gets difficult, you don't know how to pick it back up. And that's why it's important to look at the second half of the line. As I have loved you, so you should love one another. And so here's what I would encourage you to stay in contact with how Jesus has loved you. I think this is the absolute key to what it is to be the gift, is to first know what the gift is, to stay in touch, to stay in contact with this idea, and not even an idea, a very real, practical reality of how Jesus has loved us. I worked at a summer camp in North Carolina, and it was 2 camps on either side of this big mountain, and each side had a lake, and one side was the guys' side, and one side was the girls' side. It was Camp Catalea and Chastatonga. If anyone watching is from North Carolina, it was in Brevard, North Carolina. And the guys' lake was freezing cold, right? Which was appropriate because the guys didn't mind it and the girls hated the cold water. So the lake on the guys' side of the mountain was freezing cold because it had this fresh mountain stream that would feed it from the north end. And then at the southern end of the lake, there was a little outlet where the water would run out. And so basically it was fresh mountain water. You could drink the water. Wouldn't recommend it. I've seen some of the guys who go in that lake. But you could technically drink the water. It was clean. But because it was kind of fresh and moving, it was freezing cold. The girls' side was like a bath. It was so warm. But that was because there was very little water feeding it, and there was essentially no outlet for the water to flow out of. And so what happened was the water would get all gunky and gross. And no joke, you would get into the water, and sure, it would feel nice. It would feel warm. It would be comfortable. But when you would get out of it, you would be covered in all kinds of brown, slimy, gross stuff. And people, I'm assuming people were getting infections and all that kind of thing. Who knows? It just was like nasty stuff. It was comfortable. It was comfortable. But when you really sat back and had both options in front of you, it was clear as day which was better. And then you wanted to go in the guys' lake. Because it was cold, but it was clean. And it was the kind of experience you wanted when swimming in a mountain lake. It might have been a little uncomfortable, but why was it better? Why was it cleaner? Why was it fresher and purer? Why was it better? Because it had a clear source in and a clear source out. There was a flow. See, when we just receive from God but don't give anything out, it just doesn't work out for us or for anyone around us. Our lives, like the water, isn't pure. It's kind of how gunk builds up. When we have a source in but don't have a source out, it ends up being maybe a little bit more of a comfortable way to live. But when you really step back and look at the options at the end of your life, you're going to say, man, I really wish I would have given more. I don't think anybody regrets being too giving. So you got to have the source in, but you got to have the source out. So the source in, that's the gift that we receive first, right? God's love for us. And so you have to kind of just sit there and think about all the things God has done for us. Now, some of these things are universal. Like some of them we all can relate to, right? I can talk about things that all of us, have experienced. Maybe all of us, those who are Catholic, have experienced. Those who have gone to Mass last Sunday have experienced. Those who have gone to confession recently have experienced, right? But I can also talk about just general ways that we've encountered God's love through prayer, right? First of all, through Jesus' death on the cross. Like there are those kind of things that are universal, that are for all of us. But then as we get deeper into each of our lives, there's going to be an uncountable number of ways that God has loved you. And I don't know your story, but I bet you, I promise you, I guarantee you, if you were able to look back really closely at your story, you would see God's hand through it all. Through every step of the way, He's been there and He's been leading you. And sometimes He was making things happen and sometimes He was preventing something from happening. But at every step, He has been knocking on the door of our hearts. Now, do we always answer the door and let Him in? No, but at every step, He is knocking. And at every moment, He is at work. He is good. He is trustworthy. He has our best in mind. He has our absolute best in mind. He calls us to things because they're good for us. And sometimes He prevents things in our lives because they're not good for us. He is constantly working for our good. And He provides the grace we need for every struggle we face. The common worship songs do a good job at putting words to this, right? We are relentlessly, recklessly, abundantly loved. Everyone knows the story of the prodigal son, right? The son, takes half of his inheritance that would ordinarily come to him when his father dies, but he takes it and he leaves. He runs away. And he spends it just lavishly. I think he goes to Biloxi and just blows it all. And what happens when he gets through this wealth that he had? All of his friends leave him. All the women he had attracted, they all leave him. They kick him out of the penthouse suite. He's got no one else. He's got nothing. He comes up empty. He comes up dry. And all these things that he thought he was buying for himself actually were temporary. And when the money dries up, everything that he had built up goes away. And when he comes back, he is received by his father with open arms. He wasn't even thinking he was going to be welcomed back as a son, by the way. When you read the story, you realize he was going back to be hired as a servant because he was about to eat that pig food, right? That pig slop from that bucket. And then he sits there and he's looking at this pig food in his hand, about to eat it. And he goes, you know what? Even the workers, even the servants at my father's house, they eat better than this. And so he gets up and he says, I'm going to go and ask my dad for a job. And maybe I'll just get to live out my days as a servant at my father's estate. That was his plan. But God's plan is always better. And so as the son makes his way back, the father welcomes him with open arms. New slippers on his feet, the new sandals, slippers, I don't know what rich people wear. A new robe on him, a new ring. He's welcomed back as a son. And scholars throughout time have looked at this story and said, maybe this story is incorrectly called the prodigal son. Maybe a better name for it would be called the prodigal father. Because the word a prodigal is someone who spends lavishly without counting the cost. A prodigal is someone who spends and spends and spends and shows no fear of running out. And sure, the son did that with the inheritance, but the father does that with his love. The father spends his love lavishly on the son, washes it over him, bucket after bucket after bucket of just love and mercy and generosity and compassion and kindness and understanding and patience and peace. He just washes it upon the son with no fear of running out, with no fear of whether or not it's deserved or earned. It's not dependent on his mood. It's not dependent on, how his team did that weekend. It's not dependent on any of those things. It's just because of the relationship. He is the father and that is his son. And so he will love relentlessly. And that is true for all of us. He is the father and we are his children. And he does love us recklessly, abundantly, relentlessly. So I remind us of all of this because this is, I think, the first step. And at the risk of oversimplifying what it is to be the gift, I want to give you just two simple words to think about as we move on from this session. Two simple words. The first is gratitude. The first is gratitude. That's what I hope wells up in our hearts when we really reflect on what God has done for us. Gratitude. One of my favorite authors, Ann Voskamp, she said, being joyful isn't what makes you grateful. Being grateful is what makes you joyful. Let me say that again. Being joyful isn't what makes you grateful. In other words, having all the right conditions in your life to make you happy, having that car, having that promotion, having that relationship, having that house, having that sense of self-worth, having that, people like your appearance or your clothes or your sense of humor, having whatever it is that you're seeking after that's kind of finite, something material in this world, having those things and then therefore being joyful isn't what makes you grateful. No. Actually, what being grateful makes you joyful. So what does that say? The gratitude comes first. The gratitude comes first. It's feeling gratitude that actually makes you joyful. And so many of us, we flip it around. We go, yeah, I want to be grateful, but first give me the things that make me joyful, and then I'll be grateful. But the reality is, it's the other way around. We have to learn how to practice gratitude, being grateful. Then we will experience joy. So we have to recognize what we've been given. First of all, that we've been given it, right? That the blessings that we have in our lives are given to us. They are gifts. We are not the owner. We are simply the temporary caretaker, right? We're all familiar in church with the phrase, be a good steward, right? Be a good steward. Well, what is a steward? A steward is someone who takes care of something that does not ultimately belong to them. And that's what we are with our gifts, with the blessings in our lives. It's just gifts. We just are temporarily taking care of them. And in doing that, I think we can recognize our own poverty. We recognize the ways that we've been lost, the times that we've been broken. And then hopefully that gives way to us remembering that our Father is King, like that prodigal son. His dad was a wealthy man. And he says, I don't need to be out here struggling. I need to go back to my Father. And when you and I are struggling to be the gift, that's what we need to do. We need to remember, wait a minute, our Father is King. And He says to us, everything I have is yours. Remember the Father says that to the older son? Son, everything I have is yours. Our Father is the King. He is the Lord of all. Every good thing is a gift from Him and it belongs to Him. And so anytime that we're struggling to give, I think we can remember just how blessed we are and be filled with gratitude. So the first word, gratitude. But gratitude isn't an end unto itself. Gratitude leads somewhere. I want to propose to you that if we can get better at practicing gratitude, it will lead to the second word, generosity. When you grow in gratitude, you grow in generosity. When you fill your life with gratitude, the natural fruit is generosity. To know how you've been loved is key to loving others how you've been loved. Jesus says, love others as I have loved you. And so the first thing is you have to experience it, that it has to be real. You know, when I was on a mission trip in Haiti, and I was visiting a couple of families who lived on this mountainside, and they're way outside of the city. Their home is just a few walls kind of stuck together with like mud and leaves and branches. They sleep on the floor. The windows are just holes in the wall. They don't have electricity. They don't have running water. They have very little materially. And we were visiting with them. We were talking to them. It was a mother and two young boys. And we were talking to the mom about how they were doing. I was like, when was the last time you've had a full meal? How are things been going? How can we help? And she said, well, earlier today we had a little bit of rice. Yesterday we were able to get some fruits and vegetables. The day before that we had some goat. And a little bit of rice that day. The day before that we didn't have anything. Tomorrow we don't actually have anything coming. So tomorrow we probably won't have anything. You start to go, wait a minute, so some days you're just not getting food? And some days all you're getting is a little bit of rice in the morning from somebody else in the village who's helping out? You start to realize that these kids don't have food guaranteed to them. And so I was sitting with one of the brothers, and I pulled a granola bar out of my bag. It was one of those Nature's Valley bars, the one where if you just touch it the wrong way, it bursts into a million pieces, you know? So I was being very delicate with it. And I hand it to this kid, and he looks at it with amazement. I don't think he knew exactly what it was. He hadn't seen that brand before. And he's looking at it with amazement. And then he just, with two surprisingly buff arms for a little kid, just like starts tearing at it and trying to like rip it apart. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he probably doesn't know what it is, but it's the only thing I have to give him, and I don't want to destroy it. So I try to go and grab it back from him, which, if anybody got a picture of that, that's an international incident waiting to happen. American missionary rips food from Haitian boy. So I wrestle it, and I finally get the bar back from him. I'm like, no, this is food. And so I start talking the little bit of Creole I know to tell him, this is food. So I hand it back to him, and he does the same thing. He tries to just like kind of rip it. And so I was like, I'm just going to like let it happen. So finally he breaks it off into two pieces, and he's standing there looking at me with these two jagged edges of this crumbs everywhere bar. And I'm looking at him, and he's looking at me, and I don't know where this is going. And then he turns and he calls out something in Creole, and I don't know what he said, but from around the other side of the house, his brother comes running over to us. He was calling out his brother's name. And when his brother got there, he handed him half of the granola bar. This is a kid who doesn't know when his next meal is going to be. This is a kid who all he had eaten that day was a little bit of rice in the morning and a little bit of fruits and vegetables the day before, and had nothing on the calendar for tomorrow. And with one full granola bar, his first gut instinct was to be amazed and to be grateful for it, to give me these wide eyes of gratitude. And then immediately he shifted into, I've got to share this. I've got to share this. My friends, when we grow in gratitude, we grow in generosity. When we come to understand, to know, to experience, to believe in what Jesus has done for us, we will be able to share it better.